The vid feed flickered across every screen in the Federation Judicial Hall as Commander Orion Voss was sentenced to another cycle of labor on the asteroid mines of Proxima Centauri. His face, weathered beyond his 35 years, betrayed no emotion as the Jiklari magistrate pronounced judgment with 6 mouths speaking in perfect unison. The human continues to defy rehabilitation. Extended sentence approved. Those watching might have missed it. The microscopic twitch at the corner of his eye, the almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw. Nobody in the vast Federation understood what they were witnessing. The precise moment when a human being, pushed beyond all reasonable limits, finally snapped. 5 years earlier, Voss had been the Federation's golden human, the first to command an interspecies battlecruiser. That was before the Ruloxi incident, before his ship and crew were sacrificed as political pawns in a complex diplomatic game played by Federation High Command. The official records claimed Voss had disobeyed orders, triggering a massacre that killed thousands. Only Voss knew the truth. He had followed his orders to the letter, orders that were conveniently erased from all records once the Federation needed a scapegoat. "Return the prisoner to holding cell A7 for transport," ordered Chief Warden Creval, a hulking Drathorian whose exoskeleton clicked menacingly as he approached. In the dim cell, Lieutenant Alara Meridian, one of the few humans allowed to serve, as Federation prison liaisons, studied Voss with growing concern. "Commander, you should appeal," she whispered, her dark eyes darting nervously toward the surveillance orbs. Voss raised his gaze slowly. "They made a mistake, Lieutenant." "What mistake?" she asked. "They let me live," he replied, his voice unnervingly calm. "They forgot what they learned in the Contact Wars." Meridian suppressed a shudder. The Contact Wars were barely mentioned in modern Federation history, the catastrophic first encounters with humanity that had nearly brought the then smaller Federation to its knees. Humans had been outnumbered 1,000 to 1, outgunned with technology centuries more advanced. Yet the war had dragged on for decades, with humanity fighting with such savagery that the Federation eventually offered alliance rather than risk annihilation. "What exactly are you planning?" Meridian whispered, already knowing she was crossing lines she shouldn't. "Nothing they'll see coming," Voss answered, "and I'll need your help." Across the station, Warden Creval was meeting with Security Director Nezara Philox, a lithe, multi-limbed Ithavan whose species specialized in predictive behavioral analytics. "The human concerns me," Philox admitted, her 6 primary eyes blinking in sequence. "His neural patterns show anomalies." "Explain," demanded Creval. "Most prisoners exhibit predictable emotional cycles, rage, despair, acceptance. Voss shows nothing. His readings are flat, controlled." Philox's appendages manipulated a holographic display. "This contradicts everything we know about human psychology." "Meaning?" "Humans break loudly, with violence, with tears. Voss is too quiet." Creval dismissed her concerns with a wave of his armored claw. "You overthink. He's been broken for years." As the transport ship prepared for departure the next morning, neither of them noticed Lieutenant Meridian slipping a seemingly innocuous data chip into Voss's prison jumpsuit during processing. Nor did they detect the microscopic alterations she'd made to his transport manifest, ensuring he would be diverted to the Helios mining outpost rather than the maximum security facility on Proxima. The Helios outpost, understaffed, remote, and housing the Federation's most sophisticated quantum communications array, would be the perfect place for a man with nothing left to lose to begin dismantling an empire. As the prison transport lifted off, Voss stared out the reinforced viewport at the glittering federal capital. For the first time in 5 years, he allowed himself the ghost of a smile. The Federation had just made its worst mistake. The Helios mining outpost hung in perpetual twilight, eternally caught between the binary stars it orbited. Jagged spires of prison barracks jutted from asteroid fragments, connected by transparent tubes where guards could observe prisoners shuttling between mining sites. For most inmates, the crushing gravity variations and toxic ore dust meant a life expectancy measured in months, not years. Voss had been there 3 weeks when Warden Krivax, a lumbering Volgothi with scaled skin and temperament to match, summoned him to the command center. "Human, your file contains inconsistencies," Krivax growled, massive hands swiping through holographic data. "Your neural capabilities exceed standard parameters for your species." Voss maintained his practiced blank expression. The data chip Meridian had given him had done its work, subtly altering his records to include specialized quantum engineering credentials that would make him valuable to the facility's chronically understaffed technical division. "I was Federation intelligence before commanding the Icarus," Voss replied, the lie flowing smoothly. "Most of my service record remains classified." The warden studied him with compound eyes. "Very well. The quantum communications array requires maintenance. Our last technician had an accident." The warning was clear, but Voss merely nodded. "I'll need access to the central systems." "Supervised access," Krivax corrected. "Engineer Zilvar will monitor you." Zilvar proved to be a nervous Palaxian, 6 spindly limbs constantly in motion as he watched Voss work on the array's delicate systems. What he didn't realize was that Voss wasn't fixing the communication system. He was covertly reprogramming it. "Your species is puzzling," Zilvar chittered during their 3rd maintenance cycle. "So fragile physically, yet so resistant mentally. The others say you haven't screamed once in the pain chambers." Voss's hands never paused their work. "We're good at compartmentalizing." "Is that how you survived the Ruloxy incident? By compartmentalizing? The deaths you caused?" Voss's shoulders tensed momentarily before relaxing. "History isn't always written by the victors, Zilvar. Sometimes it's written by bureaucrats covering their mistakes." Over the next 2 months, Voss established a routine. Work in the mines by day, maintenance on the array by night. The guards grew complacent as he demonstrated both compliance and usefulness. Few noticed how he would pause at certain junctions, memorizing patrol patterns, security protocols, access codes carelessly entered in his presence. In his cramped cell, using materials painstakingly smuggled from the engineering bay, Voss constructed a subspace transmitter no larger than his thumbnail. When activated, it would send a single encrypted packet through the quantum array, a message that would reach precisely one recipient across 27 star systems. His opportunity came during the station's artificial night cycle. A power fluctuation, one he had carefully engineered, required immediate attention to the communications array. As expected, the overworked Zilvar authorized Voss to make repairs without direct supervision, alone in the communication hub for the first time. Voss worked with swift precision. First, he activated his miniature transmitter, sending the crucial message. Next, he executed the code he had painstakingly embedded throughout the system over weeks of maintenance. In seconds, the entire outpost's security protocols were subtly altered. Not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to create exploitable blind spots throughout the facility. As he finished, the door hissed open, revealing not the expected guard, but a fellow prisoner, a massive Kodiak-like Urson named Morg, serving 3 life sentences for piracy. "Human," Morg rumbled. "The guards know something's wrong. They're coming." Voss didn't waste time asking how Morg had escaped his cell or why he was warning him. "I need 5 more minutes." The Urson's massive shoulders blocked the doorway. "You'll have them." When the guards arrived 7 minutes later, they found Morg unconscious, Voss calmly working on legitimate repairs, and no evidence of any security breach. The incident was logged as a standard prisoner escape attempt, unrelated to Voss. But across the stars, Lieutenant Meridian received the quantum-encrypted message on her private terminal. It contained just 5 words: Phoenix Protocol. It has begun. That night, as Voss lay on his hard bunk, he allowed himself to remember the faces of his crew aboard the Icarus, 844 souls sacrificed by the Federation. For the first time since his imprisonment, he permitted himself to feel the full force of his rage. The Federation had built its power on the principle that every species could be broken through their unique vulnerabilities. What they failed to understand was that humans, when broken properly, didn't shatter. They transformed into something far more dangerous. Lieutenant Ilara Meridian had never considered herself a revolutionary. As she sat in the dim light of her quarters aboard Federation Space Station Artemis, staring at Voss's encrypted message, she acknowledged the irrevocable line she was about to cross. "Computer, execute Phoenix Protocol authentication sequence," she whispered. Her personal terminal hummed as dormant programs activated, programs installed years ago by Voss himself, when they had served together briefly on the Icarus before its final mission. The screen flickered, displaying a list of names that made her breath catch. Survivors from the Icarus, scattered across Federation space, all believing their commander had betrayed them, all waiting for this signal. Across 27 systems, similar terminals discreetly alerted their owners, former crew members who had been reassigned before the Ruloxi incident, loyal officers who had questioned the official narrative and were quietly removed from positions of influence. On the frigid research outpost of Deneb IV, Dr. Lisa Thea Vale, once the Icarus's quantum physicist, received the message while conducting experiments on exotic matter. Without hesitation, she initiated a carefully planned laboratory accident that would require evacuation to the nearest starbase, precisely where she needed to be. In the bureaucratic heart of the Federation, Records Administrator Caden Reed, former communications officer of the Icarus, used his security clearance to begin systematically corrupting certain classified files while planting others. History was being quietly rewritten. On luxury cruiser Stellar Empress, Chief Engineer Reyna, Novak excused herself from a diplomatic reception. Within hours, the cruiser would experience propulsion failure requiring emergency docking at Helios Station. The Phoenix Protocol wasn't just an escape plan, it was a meticulous conspiracy years in the making. Meanwhile, on Helios, Voss continued his careful performance of rehabilitation. He volunteered for additional mining shifts, endured punishment detail without complaint, and became indispensable to the facility's technical operations. Guards who had initially watched him with suspicion now barely noted his presence. In the mess hall, Voss found himself joined by Morg, the Ursan who had covered for him during the communications array incident. "You planned something significant, human," Morg rumbled quietly, massive paws delicately handling utensils designed for smaller species. "I smell purpose in you." Voss studied the massive alien. "Why help me?" Morg's bear-like features revealed sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. "I was merchant captain before pirate. Transported Federation diplomats to Ruloxi negotiations. Heard things, saw things." Voss went perfectly still. "What things?" "Orders. To your ship. Then different orders to Ruloxi Defense Fleet." Morg leaned closer. Federation needed incident. Needed justification for military expansion into Ruloxi space. Needed scapegoat. A muscle in Voss's jaw twitched, the only indication of the storm raging within him. "You have proof?" "Had proof. Why you think—" "I became pirate? Why you think I'm here?" Morg tapped his skull. "But memory perfect. Can testify." Before Voss could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. The station's automated voice announced, "Unscheduled vessel requesting emergency docking procedures. All prisoners return to cells immediately." Voss caught Morg's eye. That's our ride. The next 12 hours passed in carefully orchestrated chaos. The luxury cruiser Stellar Empress, experiencing catastrophic engine failure, required extensive repairs. Chief Engineer Novak insisted on using the station's fabrication facilities to manufacture replacement parts, facilities adjacent to the mining operation where Voss worked. Meanwhile, Dr. Vale arrived with a Federation Science Directorate inspection team, a surprise audit of Helios Station's research compliance. Her credentials, altered by Reed in the central database, gave her unrestricted access to all areas, including the detention block. As confusion mounted among the station's understaffed security teams, Lieutenant Meridian arrived aboard a routine prisoner transport, carrying falsified transfer orders for several inmates, including Voss, to be relocated due to overcrowding. Warden Kryvax, overwhelmed by the simultaneous demands of 3 separate Federation authorities, failed to notice the subtle pattern until it was too late. In the communications hub, Voss made his final move. With Zilvar distracted by the station-wide chaos, he executed a command that temporarily disabled all internal security systems. The power fluctuation lasted exactly 47 seconds, enough time for Morg to overpower the guards in the detention block while Dr. Vale's inspection team secured their escape route. By the time the Stellar Empress departed Helios Station 12 hours later, ostensibly with repaired engines, its passenger manifest included 4 individuals who officially weren't aboard: Voss, Morg, and 2 other inmates whose specialized skills would prove valuable. As the luxury vessel slipped into FTL, Voss stood on the observation deck, watching the receding station. 5 years of careful planning, of enduring unspeakable torment, had culminated in this moment. "What now, Commander?" asked Reyna Novak, stepping up beside him. "Now," Voss replied, his eyes cold as the vacuum outside. "We wake the ghosts of the Icarus, and the Federation learns what happens when they make an enemy of humanity." The abandoned mining facility on Ceres 9, a rogue planetoid in unclaimed space, had once been a Federation black site before budget cuts forced its decommissioning. Now it served as the gathering point for the ghosts of the Icarus. Voss stood. Before them in the cavernous main chamber, 37 former crew members who had escaped the doomed ship through chance, circumstance, or quiet warning from their commander. Many still wore the uniforms of their current postings: Federation Science Division, Colonial Administration, Transport Command. Until today, none had known the others survived. 5 years ago, the Federation sacrificed the Icarus and her crew to manufacture a crisis, Voss began, his voice echoing against stone walls. "They labeled me a war criminal, erased the true orders, and buried the evidence so deep that even I began to doubt my own memories." Dr. Vale stepped forward, her slender frame belying her fierce determination. "I've analyzed the quantum logs Commander Voss extracted from Helios. They contain fragments of the original transmission orders, orders that directly contradict the official record." On the holographic display, technical specifications flickered as Vale continued. "The Federation instructed the Icarus to enter Ruloxi space under diplomatic clearance, then deliberately transmitted contradictory identification codes that registered as a military incursion. The Ruloxi response was automatic. They followed their own protocols for defending against invasion." A murmur ran through the assembled officers as Vale displayed the final evidence. Meanwhile, the Federation had already positioned a battle group just outside Ruloxi territory, ready to respond to the unprovoked attack on a Federation vessel. Caden Reed, now a senior administrator in Federation records, nodded grimly. The Ruloxi incident gave the Federation justification to annex 7 resource-rich systems and established military presence across an entire sector. The Federation Council never knew they were voting on a manufactured crisis. "Why are you only moving now, Commander?" asked a former tactical officer. "Why wait 5 years? Voss's expression remained impassive. Because I couldn't just expose the truth. The Federation would bury it again, along with anyone who discovered it. We needed leverage. He gestured to Morg, who activated another holographic display showing complex schematics. This is Project Prometheus, a classified weapons platform the Federation has been developing in secret, in direct violation of their own charter and 17 interspecies treaties. The assembled crew stared at the technical specifications with growing horror. The platform could target and eliminate all electronic systems on a planetary scale, communication, life support, power, without destroying infrastructure. It was the perfect weapon for bloodless subjugation. The Federation presents itself as a benevolent unifier of species, Voss continued, but increasingly it operates as an empire, absorbing resources, demanding compliance, eliminating resistance. The Rulaxi were just the beginning. Lieutenant Meridian spoke up from where she stood near the entrance. 3 days ago, Federation intelligence finally connected the dots on our activities. They know something's happening, but not what. We have perhaps 2 weeks before they locate this facility. Voss nodded. Which is why we're implementing the Icarus contingency immediately. On his command, the holographic display shifted to show a complex orbital platform. This is Nexus Station, the Federation's central communications hub connecting all member worlds. In 72 hours, the Federation Council will convene there for the Centennial Assembly with representatives from every species and world in attendance. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. "You're going to hijack Nexus Station," whispered Dr. Vale. "With the Council aboard. We're going to expose the truth to every world simultaneously," Voss corrected. "With indisputable evidence and testimony. No filtered news feeds, no diplomatic sanitizing, no buried reports." "They'll never let you near Nexus," objected a former security officer. "It'll be the most heavily guarded facility in Federation space." Voss allowed himself a grim smile. "That's why we're going in as the security team." He nodded to Reed, who explained, "I've altered the duty rosters. Half of us will arrive aboard the council members' personal vessels as additional security detail, specifically requested due to heightened terror alerts that I fabricated in the system." Engineer Novak continued. "The rest will enter as technical. Staff assigned to verify the station's quantum communications array before the assembly. A routine inspection I scheduled last month when I briefly accessed the chief engineer's credentials. As the briefing continued, detailed plans unfolded, the product of 5 years of patient plotting. Entry points were assigned, contingencies discussed, emergency protocols established. What had begun as a quest for justice had evolved into a revolution. Later, as the team dispersed to prepare, Morg found Voss alone in the facility's observation dome, staring at the stars. "Your plan carries significant risk," the Urson noted. "Many species will react unpredictably when they learn how Federation has manipulated them." "That's counting on it," Voss replied without turning. "The Federation maintains control by keeping species isolated, playing on ancient rivalries, fostering dependencies. Together, they're strong enough to demand change." "And if they don't?" Morg pressed. "If chaos results instead?" Voss finally turned, his eyes reflecting the cold light of distant suns. "Then the Federation will learn what humanity has known since our earliest conflicts, that underestimating a cornered opponent is often the last mistake an empire makes." As they stood in silence, a proximity alert sounded throughout the facility. On the screens, a Federation dreadnought dropped out of FTL at the edge of the system, far sooner than anticipated. The Icarus contingency would need to be accelerated. Nexus Station glittered against the void, its massive ring structure rotating majestically around a central hub that housed the most powerful communications array ever constructed. As the diplomatic vessels approached, each bearing representatives of their respective worlds for the Centennial Assembly, The station's defenses performed meticulous security scans. None detected anything amiss among the additional security personnel assigned to various delegations, nor among the technical specialists arriving to perform last-minute system checks. Admiral Zorvan Pell, the highest-ranking Axioni in Federation security, watched the proceedings from the station's command center. With 6 eyes blinking in steady sequence, a sign of contentment in his species. "Status report," he ordered, his exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh lighting. "All delegations proceeding through security protocols as scheduled," responded his aide. "Assembly hall preparations are complete. Communications array operating. At optimal parameters." The Admiral's mandibles clicked in approval. "And the humans?" Representative Ekron's shuttle has docked. "Their delegation is smaller than usual, still protesting the Ruloxi incident, apparently." "Predictable," Pell chittered dismissively. 5 years and they still can't accept that one of their commanders made a catastrophic error. Such emotional creatures. On the other side of the station, Dr. Lysathea Vale moved efficiently through the technical corridors, her falsified credentials granting her access to increasingly sensitive areas. Behind her, 2 teammates disguised as assistants carried diagnostic equipment that contained far more than scanning tools. "Central communications nexus in 50 meters," she sub-vocalized into her neural implant. "Security presence as expected, proceeding to Phase 2. Throughout the station, similar. Reports streamed in through the secure channel Voss had established. Former Icarus crew members, now embedded in a dozen different delegations, methodically positioned themselves near critical junctures. In the diplomatic reception area, Voss himself moved confidently in the uniform of a Federation security lieutenant. Assigned to the Urson delegation, where Morg, now posing as a cultural attaché, engaged various diplomats in seemingly innocuous conversation. "The human seems tense," observed High Counselor Tavzin, a towering crystalline Nephilim whose silicon-based body refracted light in hypnotic patterns. "Is it a characteristic of their species?" "Humans always tense," Morg rumbled diplomatically. "They perceive threats constantly. Evolutionary response to being physically inferior species." The Nephilim's crystalline structure vibrated in what passed for laughter. "Yet they fought the Federation to a standstill. Curious contradiction." "The greatest mistake in dealing with humans," Morg replied carefully, "is assuming physical limitation equals limitation of will." Across the reception hall, Lieutenant Meridian had positioned herself near a service entrance, her uniform indicating she was assigned to the Palaxian delegation. Through her neural implant, she monitored the station's security channels. "Command, we have a complication," she sub-vocalized. "Admiral Pell has ordered additional quantum scans of all technical areas following the unscheduled arrival of a priority 1 communication." In the maintenance shaft, where he had established their temporary command center, Caden Reed cursed softly. "They know something's coming. Vale, accelerate your timeline. Everyone else prepare for Phase 3 on my mark." Throughout the station, 36 humans tensed imperceptibly, hands drifting closer to concealed weapons or emergency devices. In the central communications hub, Dr. Vale had reached the quantum core, the technological marvel that enabled instantaneous communication across thousands of light years. Her assistants swiftly attached their diagnostic equipment to key junctions, while she engaged the supervising technician in technical jargon complex enough to distract him. "Fascinating adaptation of Jotaki pulse theory," she commented, examining the system. "Though I notice you're still using standard Federation encryption protocols despite the quantum entanglement properties." "New protocols being implemented next cycle," the technician replied proudly. "Designed by the Ithavan themselves. Unbreakable, they say." Vale smiled thinly. "Nothing's unbreakable, just temporarily secure." As she spoke, her equipment silently infiltrated the system, establishing backdoor access points to the entire communications network. When the signal came, they would be able to override all Federation channels simultaneously. The assembly hall was nearly full when the alarms began. Admiral Pell stared in disbelief at the security alert flashing across his terminal. Prison break. At Helios Mining Outpost. Commander Orion Voss escaped? That's impossible. He was reported there 3 days ago during inspection. His aide chittered nervously. Sir, that's not all. We're receiving reports of data breaches across multiple secure facilities. Records being accessed. And there's an unauthorized transmission attempting to override the massive view screens. Around the assembly hall suddenly flickered, the Federation emblem replaced by a single image, the USS Icarus, the ship destroyed in the incident 5 years earlier. In the ensuing chaos, as security forces scrambled to respond to the apparent system breach, no one noticed Voss calmly walking toward the central podium, removing his helmet as he did so. No one except Admiral Pell, whose compound eyes widened in shock as he recognized the human he had personally sentenced years earlier. "Security! Detain that human!" he shrieked into his communicator. But the security forces didn't respond. Throughout the station, at precisely coordinated moments, Voss's team had disabled critical security junctions, isolated command centers, and locked down key access points. Voss reached the podium unopposed as gasps of recognition spread through the assembly. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the vast chamber. 5 years ago, I was labeled a war criminal, responsible for the deaths of thousands of Rulaxi civilians and my own crew. Today, you will learn the truth, not just about the Icarus, but about what the Federation has become. On every screen, across the station, and now through the quantum network on screens across thousands of worlds, the evidence began to play. Silence gripped the assembly hall as the evidence unfolded across every screen. Unaltered transmission logs, classified, directives, the original orders to the Icarus juxtaposed with the falsified records. The faces of the Federation High Command during the Rulaxi crisis appeared, their private communications now exposed. "We need this confrontation," Admiral Pell's voice echoed from 5 years earlier. "The Rulaxi control too many resources we require. Public opinion would never support direct intervention. But if they were to attack one of our vessels unprovoked..." The recording continued mercilessly, revealing how Federation leadership had orchestrated the sacrifice of the Icarus, condemning 844 crew members and triggering a conflict that killed thousands of Rulaxi civilians, all to justify a territorial annexation deemed necessary for Federation expansion. As the evidence mounted, the mood in the assembly shifted from shock to outrage. Representatives of dozens of species began shouting questions, demands, accusations. Some turned on the Federation security forces present, while others huddled with their delegations in urgent conference. At the center of the storm, Voss remained eerily calm. When he raised his hand, the chamber gradually quieted. "The Rulaxi incident was not an isolated case," he continued. "For decades, the Federation has manipulated member species against one another, engineered crises to justify military interventions, and systematically absorbed independent worlds through coercion disguised as diplomacy." With a gesture, the screens shifted to display the schematics of Project Prometheus, the planetary subjugation system being developed in secret. "This is the Federation's vision of unity," Voss declared. "Not cooperation between equals, but submission to central authority. Any world that resists faces consequences: economic isolation, manufactured internal conflicts, or if necessary, direct intervention." From his position near the emergency exit, Morg watched the assembly's reaction with grim satisfaction. The crystalline Nephilim were vibrating at frequencies indicating extreme agitation. The gaseous Vrel representatives had changed color from tranquil blue to alarmed crimson. Even the normally impassive Axioni delegates were showing signs of distress. "The Federation was founded on noble principles," Voss continued. mutual aid, shared knowledge, collective security. Those principles have been betrayed by leaders who view diversity not as strength, but as an inconvenience to be managed, who see differences between species not as opportunities for growth, but as weaknesses to be exploited. In the station's security center, Admiral Pell frantically tried to override the broadcast. "Cut all feeds! Lock down the quantum array!" "We can't, sir," his aide replied, mandibles trembling. "The system isn't responding to administrator commands." "Then send in the troops. Arrest them all." "The security forces. They're not responding either." Throughout the station, Federation security personnel found themselves contained in sealed compartments or facing the business end of weapons held by former Icarus crew members. Lieutenant Meridian had enacted Phase 3 perfectly, neutralizing potential resistance without bloodshed. On the central view screen, Dr. Vale now appeared, presenting detailed analyses of Federation manipulation across a dozen worlds. Caden. Reed followed with evidence of systematic historical revisionism within Federation records. Testimony from Morgue and others described witnessing Federation duplicity firsthand. As the evidence mounted, the Federation Council representatives grew increasingly isolated, their protests drowned out by the rising chorus of outrage from member worlds. In orbit around Nexus Station, the first military vessels began to arrive, responding to distress calls from various delegations. But rather than moving to retake the station, many took up protective positions around their respective diplomatic ships. The Federation was fragmenting before their eyes. Admiral Pell finally broke through the security lockdown and burst into the assembly hall with a squad of loyal troops. "This is high treason!" he shrieked, his exoskeleton flushing with rage colors. "Commander Voss and his co-conspirators will be arrested immediately." The Admiral advanced toward the podium, weapon drawn, only to find himself facing not just Voss, but representatives from 7 major species who moved to stand between them. "The human speaks truth," declared the Nephilim counselor, crystalline body pulsing with determined light. "We have suspected Federation manipulation for decades, but lacked proof." The Nephilim Collective withdraws from Federation authority pending complete reorganization of leadership and governing principles. Similar declarations followed, one after another, as centuries-old alliances dissolved in minutes. Voss watched silently, neither triumphant nor vengeful. This was never about destroying the Federation. It was about forcing a reckoning long overdue. As Federation troops surrounded the podium, increasingly uncertain about their orders given the diplomatic chaos unfolding, Voss finally addressed Admiral Pell directly. "You believed humans were valuable additions to the Federation because we're adaptable," he said quietly. "What you failed to understand is why we're adaptable. Throughout our history, we've faced extinction-level threats from nature, from each other, from our own creations. We survived not just through physical evolution, but through psychological resilience." Voss stepped closer, his voice dropping so only the Admiral could hear. "When you break a Drathorian, they die. Break an Ithvan, they submit. Break a Jotaki, they flee. But when you break a human, truly break us beyond all hope, something else emerges. Something that doesn't care about survival anymore. Something focused entirely on ensuring that whoever broke us pays the price, no matter the cost." Silence gripped the assembly hall as the evidence unfolded across every screen. Unaltered transmission logs, classified directives, the original orders to the Icarus juxtaposed with the falsified records. The faces of the Federation High Command during the Rulaxi crisis appeared, their private communications now exposed. "We need this confrontation," Admiral Pell's voice echoed from 5 years earlier. "The Rulaxi control too many resources we require. Public opinion would never support direct intervention. But if they were to attack one of our vessels unprovoked..." The recording continued mercilessly, revealing how Federation leadership had orchestrated the sacrifice of the Icarus, condemning 844 crew members and triggering a conflict that killed thousands of Rulaxi civilians, all to justify a territorial annexation deemed necessary for Federation expansion. As the evidence mounted, the mood in the assembly shifted from shock to outrage. Representatives of dozens of species began shouting questions, demands, accusations. Some turned on the Federation security forces present, while others huddled with their delegations in urgent conference. At the center of the storm, Voss remained eerily calm. When he raised his hand, the chamber gradually quieted. The Rulaxi incident was not an isolated case, he continued. For decades, the Federation has manipulated member species against one another, engineered crises to justify military interventions, and systematically absorbed independent worlds through coercion disguised as diplomacy. With a gesture, the screens shifted to display the schematics of Project Prometheus, the planetary subjugation system being developed in secret. This is the Federation's vision of unity, Voss declared. Not cooperation between equals, but submission to central authority. Any world that resists faces consequences: economic isolation, manufactured internal conflicts, or if necessary, direct intervention. From his position near the emergency exit, Morg watched the assembly's reaction with grim satisfaction. The crystalline Nephilim were vibrating at frequencies indicating extreme agitation. The gaseous Vrel representatives had changed color from tranquil blue to alarmed crimson. Even the normally impassive Axioni delegates were showing signs of distress. The Federation was founded on noble principles, Voss continued. Mutual aid, shared knowledge, collective security. Those principles have been betrayed by leaders who view diversity not as strength, but as an inconvenience to be managed, who see differences between species not as opportunities for growth, but as weaknesses to be exploited. In the station's security center, Admiral Pell frantically tried to override the broadcast. "Cut all feeds! Lock down the quantum array!" "We can't, sir," his aide replied, mandibles trembling. "The system isn't responding to administrator commands." Then, "Send in the troops! Arrest them all!" The security forces, they're not responding either. Throughout the station, Federation security personnel found themselves contained in sealed compartments or facing the business end of weapons held by former Icarus crew members. Lieutenant Meridian had enacted Phase 3 perfectly, neutralizing potential resistance without bloodshed. On the central view screen, Dr. Vale now appeared, presenting detailed analyses of Federation manipulation across a dozen worlds. Caden. Reed followed with evidence of systematic historical revisionism within Federation records. Testimony from Morg and others described witnessing Federation duplicity firsthand. As the evidence mounted, the Federation Council representatives grew increasingly isolated, their protests drowned out by the rising chorus of outrage from member worlds. In orbit around Nexus Station, the first military vessels began to arrive, responding to distress calls from various delegations. But rather than moving to retake the station, many took up protective positions around their respective diplomatic ships. The Federation was fragmenting before their eyes. Admiral Pell finally broke through the security lockdown and burst into the assembly hall with a squad of loyal troops. "This is high treason!" he shrieked, his exoskeleton flushing with rage colors. "Commander Voss and his co-conspirators will be arrested immediately." The Admiral advanced toward the podium, weapon drawn, only to find himself facing not just Voss, but representatives from 7 major species who moved to stand between them. "Human speaks truth," declared the Nephilim counselor, crystalline body pulsing with determined light. "We have suspected Federation manipulation for decades but lacked proof. The Nephilim Collective withdraws from Federation authority pending complete reorganization of leadership and governing principles." Similar declarations followed, one after another, as centuries-old alliances dissolved in minutes. Voss watched silently, neither triumphant nor vengeful. This was never about destroying the Federation. It was about forcing a reckoning long overdue. As Federation troops surrounded the podium, increasingly uncertain about their orders given the diplomatic chaos unfolding, Voss finally addressed Admiral Pell directly. "You believed humans were valuable additions to the Federation because we're adaptable," he said quietly. "What you failed to understand is why we're adaptable. Throughout our history, we've faced extinction-level threats from nature, from each other, from our own creations. We survived not just through physical evolution, but through psychological resilience." Voss stepped closer, his voice dropping so only the Admiral could hear. "When you break a Drathorian, they die. Break an Ithvan, they submit. Break a Jotaki, they flee. But when you break a human, truly break us beyond all hope, something else emerges. Something that doesn't care about survival anymore. Something focused entirely on ensuring that whoever broke us pays the price, no matter the cost." Around them, the assembly continued its chaotic dissolution. Diplomatic teams were calling for emergency evacuations. Security forces were receiving contradictory orders. The very foundation of interstellar governance was crumbling. "You won't get away with this," Pell hissed, mandibles clicking rapidly. "The Federation has stood for 8 centuries. It cannot be undone by one vengeful human." "I never intended to." "Destroy the Federation," Voss replied calmly, "only to break what it has become so something better can emerge. The truth does the rest." A sudden explosion rocked the station, sending delegates scrambling for cover. Through the massive viewport, they watched as a Federation dreadnought fired on a Nephilim diplomatic vessel, someone in the chain of command making a catastrophic decision. The Nephilim cruisers responded immediately, their crystalline weapons systems charging with blinding light. Within seconds, the standoff evolved into a firefight as ships from multiple factions chose sides. "This is madness!" Pell shrieked. "You've started an interstellar war!" Voss shook his head. "No. The war began 5 years ago when you sacrificed. 844 souls for territorial gain. This is just the reckoning." As chaos engulfed the assembly hall, Lieutenant Meridian appeared at Voss's side. "Commander, our extraction window is closing. We need to move now." Voss nodded and addressed the nearest communication array one final time, his voice broadcasting to every ship, every station, every world still connected to the quantum network. The Federation was built on a promise that together we are stronger than we are alone. That promise remains true even if its guardians have failed. What rises from today's revelations is your choice. You can cling to the comfortable lie of benevolent oversight, or you can demand a true federation of equals, built on transparency, accountability, and genuine respect for the unique nature of every species. With those words, Voss and his team disappeared into the evacuation corridors as Federation forces finally broke through the security lockdowns. 3 weeks later, on a remote observation platform at the edge of what had once been Federation space, Voss stood with his closest allies, watching the news feed from across the former member worlds. The Federation, as it had existed, was gone. In its place, an interstellar concord was forming, built on new principles of transparency and genuine cooperation. Many worlds had withdrawn completely, choosing independence. Others had formed regional alliances based on shared interests rather than centralized authority. "Was it worth it?" asked Dr. Vale, standing at his shoulder. "All those years of planning, suffering, waiting?" Voss watched as the screen showed Admiral Pell and other Federation leaders being led to trial before a multi-species tribunal. The Ruloxy representatives, finally invited to participate in interstellar governance, were reading the charges. "Justice was only part of it," Voss replied. "The Federation needed to understand something fundamental about humanity." "Which is?" Morg rumbled from where he stood nearby. "That our greatest strength isn't our adaptability or ingenuity," Voss said quietly. It's what happens when you push us past breaking. Other species shatter. Humans transform. Lieutenant Meridian approached with a data tablet. The last of the Icarus survivors have been officially exonerated, and the Concord Assembly has sent a formal request for humanity to take a leadership role in drafting the new charter. Voss took the tablet, scrolling through the message. They want us to lead because they fear us now. No, Meridian corrected. They want us to lead because they finally understand us. You showed them something they'd never seen before. The capacity to endure injustice, not just for personal vengeance, but for systemic change. As the observation platform rotated, the vast expanse of stars came into view. Thousands of worlds now charting their own destinies, forming new connections, based on choice rather than coercion. The Federation's worst mistake hadn't been framing an innocent commander or sacrificing a starship. It hadn't even been underestimating humanity's capacity for vengeance. Their worst mistake had been failing to understand that when a human finally snaps, they don't just destroy what broke them, they remake the entire universe so nothing can ever break that way again. Voss looked out at the stars, a slight smile finally crossing his face. Let's help them build something worthy of the sacrifice.